Hello everyone, I welcome you all to another video by Legacy IAS where we're going to talk about one of the most popular institutions of independent India. We're talking about the institution which makes India truly democratic, which is the first institution you think about when you say that the ultimate decision maker are the people of this country. It is that body which has been entrusted with the responsibility of making democracy live in practice. We're talking about the Election Commission of India, the permanent body, the independent body, and the constitutional body entrusted with this very responsibility. As far as the Election Commission of India is concerned, it is a body which is built or brought in place to maintain independence, integrity, and autonomy. It is a body which is very much voter centric. It tries to encourage participation, it tries to encourage engagement. This is being done by achieving awareness or by spreading awareness, by increasing accessibility, how we are trying to include the multiple sections of the population because political equality is being realized through through this democratic process. We're trying to increase participation of all the stakeholders, adopt the highest form of professionalism because the election commission basically conducts these elections with a proper system, proper mechanism in the most dignified and rules oriented pattern. So hence it's referred to as associated with professionalism, delivering free, fair as well as transparent election with the ultimate objective and the vision of promoting, continuing and maintaining electoral democracy and governance in India. A lot of times, a lot of innovative practices have also been adopted by the Election Commission to make it dynamic, to make it relevant, to meet the challenges of the current circumstances and be ahead of its time. So, in this regard, sometimes we look inwards as to what we can do to correct things in our system, but we also look outside. All right, so we take precedence from both within the country as well as outside. Before we get into the topic of discussion, whereby we're going to talk about allotment of symbols to the different political parties and how the election commission kind of becomes a messiah in terms of resolution of these disputes. What are the different powers and functions which are being vested on them? But before that, let us have a brief idea as to what this election commission is all about. As I said, it is a constitutional body which finds its name, its reference within the Constitution in Article 324 of the Indian Constitution, which talks about how superintendent's direction and the control of these elections in India is to be given in the hands of the Election Commission of India. All right. Now, we have two organizations as far as elections are concerned. One is the Election Commission of India, who takes care of the elections which takes place in the central legislature, that is elections to the parliament, and the one that takes place in the states. But we do have a three-tier of government. So the third tier, as far as the third tier of government is concerned, we have the State Election Commission. All right, the State Election Commission taking care of the entire elections which takes place in the rural and urban areas, the local governments of panchayats and municipalities. As far as the Election Commission of India is concerned, it is being authorized to superintend, direct and control the entire process of elections, starting from the preparation of electoral rolls, conducting these elections with regards to the elections in the parliament as also in the state legislature, and also elections to the offices of the president as well as vice president. All right, so there's a very vast and a sole authority with regards to elections is what is being given and authorized to this particular body. What the Constitution also says, Article 324, Clause 2 also says that this commission should consist of or shall consist of the Chief Election Commissioner and such number of other election commissioners, if any, as the President may from time to time fix, and the appointment of the Chief Election Commissioner and other election commissioners shall, subject to the provisions of any law made in that behalf by the Parliament, be made by the President. What does the Constitution mean by this? Let's break it down. The Election Commission, the entire body of which we refer to as Election Commission, is going to be comprised of definitely the Chief Election Commissioner. All right. Now, additionally, in addition to this Chief Election Commissioner, you can have other election commissioners, but their number is not fixed. Who is going to fix this number? This number is going to be fixed by none other than the executive head of the state, which is the President. The appointment of the Chief Election Commissioner as well as any other commissioners shall be made by the President on behalf of any law that is being made by the Parliament. As we all know that the central legislature, the Parliament is the central legislature of the entire country, and the executive head of the state is the President. So the lawmaking body, whatever laws are to be made with regards to elections, the election commissioner or the chief election commissioner, all of that lawmaking is supposed to be made by the Parliament, and execution is supposed to be done in the name of the President, and the appointing powers also lie with the President. But the President acts according to the aid and advice of the Council of Ministers headed by the Prime Minister, who are a part of the Parliament. All right. So the Constitution talks about the composition of this election commission with a chief election commissioner and other election commissioners whose number may be fixed by the President, and all of them are appointed by the President according to a law made by the Parliament. Moving on to the third clause, which says that when any other election commissioner is appointed, when any of this election commissioner is appointed, then the chief election commissioner shall act as the chairman. So, in the event that, let's say for example, we don't have an election commissioners other than the chief election commissioner, but in the event when there are other election commissioners, then by default, the chief election commissioner will act as chairman of the entire election commission. What will they also say in addition to that, that before each general election to the House of People and to the Legislative Assembly of the state, which means the lower houses, and before the first general election and thereafter, before each biennial election to the Legislative Council of each state, having such council, the President may also appoint, after consultation with the Election Commission, such regional commissioners as he may consider necessary to assist the Election Commission in the performance of his functions conferred by the Commission. So what does it mean? That whenever you have elections of the lower house in the central legislature, which is the House of People or the Lok Sabha, or the state, which is the Legislative Assembly, at any point of time, or even for that matter, the Legislative Council, whichever states have the Legislative Councils, whenever such elections are to be held, okay, the President may intervene and appoint additional regional commissioners wherever it is necessary. All right. In order to, the objective or the function is to assist the Election Commission in the performance of the functions. So this is one other important aspect which is being mentioned for the election commissioner. What it also says that subject to the provisions of any law made by the Parliament, the conditions of service, tenure of office and of the election commissioners as well as the regional commissioners shall be made by whom? Only the President. Alright? Provided that the Chief Election Commissioner shall not be removed from his office except in a manner and on the grounds, just like a judge of the Supreme Court. And the conditions of service of the Chief Election Commissioner shall not be varied to his disadvantage after his appointment. Moreover, any other election commissioner or regional commissioner shall not be removed from his office except on the recommendation of the Chief Election Commissioner. Couple of things which are mentioned in clause 5. Let us look at that. The idea is we are trying to talk about the independence of the Election Commission of India. Now here we are talking about some security of tenure. Service and tenure of office as decided, they cannot be removed from their office unless the procedure that is established for removing a judge of the Supreme Court. And none of the service conditions that had been promised to that Chief Election Commissioner shall be varied, shall be changed, altered, and particularly diminished after that person has joined this office. So none of it can be varied to his disadvantage. Moreover, if we have to remove any other election commissioner or other regional commissioners, prior recommendation of the CEC, the Chief Election Commissioner, is absolutely necessary. So it cannot be done except on the recommendation of the Chief Election Commissioner. So there's a lot of security that we're talking about so that we are able to have an independent and an impartial Election Commission of India. Now the constitutional provisions, the 6th clause also talks about the President and the Governor of a state, when so requested by the Election Commission, make available to the Election Commission or to the Regional Commissioner such staff as may be necessary for the discharge of functions conferred on the Election Commission. So what we're trying to say that when we are having or holding elections in any state or the country for that matter, there is a need for manpower. So a lot of times the Election Commission is basically going to ask the executive head of the country in case of elections to the national legislature, the central legislature, or the executive head of the state, which is the governor, in case there are elections to be held in the state, for such staff that may be necessary for the conduct of these elections. So such manpower that may be necessary for conducting the elections and discharging the functions which have been entrusted upon the Election Commission. So such kind of support and assistance can be asked by the Election Commission to the respective heads of the state in the center as well as in the respective states. Now, if we look at the offices which are there of the Election Commission of India, we talked about the Chief Election Commissioner and other election commissioners. Okay, so the Chief Election Commissioner and 2 other election commissioners basically have equal powers. Definitely, we discussed the fact that if there are election commissioners other than the Chief Election Commissioner, then the CEC, that is the Chief Election Commissioner, becomes the chairman. But that does not mean a direct subordination. It is also equality. They have equal powers and receive equal salary. This is very important, that they receive equal salary, allowances and other prerequisites which are similar to whom? Another constitutional position of India who also enjoys a lot of trust of the public, which is the judge of the Supreme Court. So in the case of difference of opinion between the Chief Election Commissioner and or 2 other election commissioners, the entire decision is being taken on majority. which only shows or refers to the principle of equality. When you have only a majority voting, which means that you are having these people being treated equally. All right. The other thing, as far as the tenure of the Election Commission is concerned, basically all the officers here hold office for a term of 6 years or until they attain age of 65 years, whichever is earlier. Either it is 6 years within which they complete their tenure or 65 years, whichever is earlier. That is the end time of these officers of Election Commission. But in between that also, they can resign at any point of time, and they also may be removed from their office. All right. Now, as far as the impartiality and independence of the Election Commission is concerned, just a couple of things which bring us or bring our attention to the fact that how we have restored the independence of this particular position. Number one, which we discussed, is security of tenure, that they cannot be removed abruptly. There has to be proper procedure which is followed, similar to the way you remove a judge of the Supreme Court. Moreover, the service conditions cannot be varied to the disadvantage of the election commissioners, especially after their appointment. And also, the other election commissioners or the regional commissioners cannot be removed from the office directly by the executive, but they need the prior recommendation of whom? The Chief Election Commissioner for their removal. Now, there are a lot of powers which the Election Commission of India enjoys, which can be divided into administrative, advisory, quasi-judicial. So we look at each of these powers one after the other. Now, as far as the administrative powers of the Election Commission are concerned, first is that the Election Commission determines the territorial areas of the electoral constituencies throughout the country on the basis of the Delimitation Commission or Act of Parliament. So what does it mean that when you are, as the election commissioner, holding elections, you do it on the basis of the constituencies which have been divided or decided by the Delimitation Commission. All right. And once these constituencies are decided, accordingly, the Election Commission steps in to undertake the process of elections. Also, they prepare and periodically revise these electoral rolls, which is basically a register of or mentioning all the eligible voters, because India votes by universal adult franchise. So every citizen 18 years of age, they are eligible to be registered into these electoral rolls. So that process, that part is also being done as a part of administrative power of the Election Commission of India. They also notify the dates, the schedule of the elections. Okay, when are they supposed to take place, which area, and also look into or scrutinize the people who have nominated themselves. All right. They also grant recognition to the political parties and allot them election symbols. This is the topic where we're going to discuss in detail further ahead. The administrative powers also include mentioning the code of conduct, which has to be observed by both the political parties as well as their individual candidates during the election. They can also, as I mentioned before, ask the president or the governor to appoint the staff which is required, the manpower which is required to conduct free and fair elections in the country. They may also look into the machinery of elections, all right, and finally to register these political parties for the purpose of election, grant them the status whether they should be categorized as a national party or a state party, and this is all based on the poll performance, because of which they accredit them whether it's a national party or a state party. In addition to that, since the Election Commission has good enough idea in matters of elections, it also advises the president on matters with regards to disqualification of members of the parliament. Similarly, it does in the states for the governor with regards to members of the state legislature. Also, the president can also be advised whether elections should be held in a state, the ones which are under president's rule. All right, so that kind of suitability of elections, whether they can take place, is also something on which the Election Commission can advise. We also have the quasi-judicial powers, meaning sometimes the Election Commission basically takes decisions. It takes decisions when it has to settle disputes, when it is granting recognition to political parties and allotting them the election symbols. It can also appoint officers for looking into the disputes with regards to electoral engagements. And finally, if there are any evidences or complaints of rigging, booth capturing, or violence, or any other irregularities for that matter, it can take the decision to cancel the polls at that point of time. So, having understood the powers of the Election Commission, essential to maintain, continue free and fair elections and also remain an independent body, let us look at some of the issues which have cropped up as far as the Election Commission is concerned. Recently, we had an issue in Maharashtra, and where we had the discussion where the Uddhav Thackeray-led Shiv Sena approached the Election Commission of India on dispute as to who will rightfully own or claim control over, or which symbol will basically represent the Shiv Sena, the bow and arrow, which faction of Shiv Sena is going to represent the bow and arrow. That was the issue which cropped up. After Mulayam Singh was basically deposed as the party president earlier by his son Akhilesh Yadav, he also approached the election commissioner again to claim the symbol of the cycle. We also had an issue down south when AIDMK was divided into two groups led by different leaders, Ms. Janki and Jayalalitha. Then soon before the elections in 1989, we had the Election Commission freezing the particular symbol. So the point is that there have been issues with regards to the symbols and allotment of symbols to these political parties. Now, as far as the parties are concerned, whether it's national or state, it is the Election Commission who has basically been authorized, all right, to register these political parties for the purposes of election and allot them the status of either a national or a state party, particularly based on their poll performance. Now, for them to conduct any of these elections, any electoral or election symbol is basically allotted to every political party. In this regard, these particular symbols are used by the parties during campaigning, all right, and also on the electoral voting machines or EVM for the voters to use the symbol as reference and vote for that particular candidate or that particular party. Now, as far as the entire issue with regards to any of these electoral matters on symbols are concerned, we have the Election Symbols Reservation and Allotment Order of 1968, which has been empowered by the Election Commission to recognize the political parties and allot them symbols. So Election Commission through this particular order has been authorized or empowered to recognize political parties as well as provide them with symbols. In this regard, we have basically party symbols in the form of either reserved, which is for 8 national parties and 64 state parties, also free, which basically is through a pool of already 200 free symbols that are to be allotted to lots and lots of unrecognized parties that suddenly come up before elections. So that sudden allotment of symbols is being done through this free repository, which is there, 200 repository of symbols, and to be used during elections. Now, as per the guidelines which is mentioned in this particular order, we have any party or candidate has to basically provide a list of 3 symbols from the Election Commissioner's symbols at the time when they are filing their nomination papers, all right? From amongst them, 1 symbol is allotted to the party or the candidate on a first come first served basis. Okay, it is done whoever comes first. When a recognized political party splits, now the Election Commission is basically the authorized authority for assigning them the symbol. So this is one of the potential area of disputes, that what happens when there is splits and merger. It is this election commission who has been given the responsibility. So in order to provide for specification, reservation, choice and allotment of symbols at elections in parliamentary and assembly constituencies for their recognition is being done by the election commission. At the time when a particular symbol has been allotted to a party, they have to use only that symbol and no other symbol for their election process. Now, continuing this discussion on election symbols, what this order also says, that if any state party is basically have been allotted a particular symbol, then that symbol is also being reserved for that particular party, and it is that symbol which is going to represent that particular party and its people. What is very important here is that under paragraph 15 of this order, it was being decided and claimed that any such disputes with regards to the election symbols is something to be decided and managed by the election commission only. The election commission is to be the only authority to decide on issues whenever there is a dispute or the merger. This was particularly held, meaning the election symbols reservation and allotment order of 1968 was upheld, and this judgment was given by the Supreme Court in the case Sadiq Ali and another versus the Election Commission of India in 1971. So this is where the Supreme Court stated that it is going to be the Election Commission only to decide on this matter. What we also see, if we look at the process which is basically involved in this particular decision or allotment of election symbols is concerned, we have the Election Commission who can basically take suo motu cognizance of any such cases of disputes. Not necessarily someone might have to also step in or approach the Election Commission in this regard. It can only act when at least one party approaches it with its claim. Not necessarily that both of them have to put forward this dispute. Moreover, once a claim has been raised with the Election Commission, it starts with its proceedings by giving a notice to the other to give its version, because as a fair judgment, for a fair judgment, it's important to listen to both sides of the story. So the Election Commission, once it receives a complaint from any one side, it asks the other side to put forward its versions, and both parties are asked to produce evidence in order to support its claim. A lot of scrutiny is also being done by the Election Commission, who looks into the different rival groups and the claims that they're basically saying. If the commission is satisfied that there does exist some rival factions, it then decides which faction is a recognized party. All right. So there are categories or there are procedures to kind of make yourself a recognized and an unrecognized party. On the basis of that, it gives a judgment. Also, the Election Commission employs a test of majority principle to decide which is the recognized party. So it looks at the strength of each group in that party's organization and the legislature. In case the Election Commission is not able to determine the strength of the rival groups based on the amount of support that they are getting within the party, within the members of that particular party, it looks at testing the majority among the elected members of parliament or members of legislative assembly. Finally, once the decision of the commission comes out, it is binding on all such rivals and all such, competing groups. So in 1997, the Election Commission introduced a new rule under which one faction got the party symbol and the other had to register itself as a separate party. All right. So it is upon the decision that the Election Commission takes that you essentially have to either take that particular symbol or altogether form a separate party having a new symbol. The national or the state party status of the new formation would be determined on the basis of their performance in the central or the state elections and how are they doing in the polls. This is the process through which you have such resolution on disputes with regards to election symbols. Also, the ECI may decide the disputes in favor of one faction which holds enough support, all right, and has the will of the majority of its members within that particular recognized party. Where a particular party is vertically divided, or let's say it's not possible to ascertain the majority, then the election commission may also go on to freeze that particular party's symbol and allow the groups to register themselves with new names or add prefixes or suffixes to the existing name. So in the event that they are able to decide a majority, it comes up with a decision. If no clear majority has been decided, that party symbol altogether gets frozen by the election commission. Till the election commission decides on the issue, it may freeze the party symbol and advise the groups to fight elections in different names and on temporary symbols. If rival factions get reunited, if at all they come back and they're not fighting on election symbol anymore, then the claimants may approach the election commission again so that they can be recognized as one together party, one single party. The election commission in this case is also empowered to recognize mergers, all right? So any such splits or any such mergers which basically happen, that entire recognition of symbols is being done along with the decision of the election commission. He may also restore the symbol and the name of the original party in case these warring groups come together, they are reunited, or sometimes there is even a merger. Before recognizing a group as the official party, the election commission ascertains the support which is enjoyed by the political party in its organizational as well as its legislative wing. So a lot depends upon a judicious call which the election commission takes according to the order which has been put forward and upheld by the Supreme Court. A lot of issues, a lot of cases have come up with regards to such disputes. Some of them is where there was a public interest litigation which was filed against or rather seeking the removal of election commissions, election symbols from the ballot papers, all right, for the different municipal elections which were taking place in the Delhi municipality. At this point of time, the Delhi High Court had basically dismissed this particular case. So it did not go, but still it was an issue with regards to election symbols and removing them altogether. However, there have been disputes between political parties with regards to symbol. We have the Federal Party of Manipur and DMK using the same symbol of rising sun and a dispute arising on that. The BSP and the Assam Ganga Parishad both using elephant as their symbol. The Samajwadi Party and the Jammu and Kashmir Panthers Party using the cycle. And the Jharkhand Mukti Morcha and the Shiv Sena both using bow and arrow as their electoral symbol. So all of these have been issues and times where symbols have been a point of discontent besides a lot of other things between political parties. All right. In short, if we look at the issues, in spite of all the work and effort that the Election Commission does, there are of course areas of improvement which it needs to look into. One is that the Constitution has not prescribed qualifications, either that can be legal, educational, administrative, or even judicial, for how these election commission members should be. Their qualifications is not mentioned. Moreover, they have not specified the term as far as the election commission's tenure is concerned. We only have the upper limits. All right. So the Constitution has not debarred the retiring election commissioners from further appointment, which is something which can affect the independence and the impartiality that the election commission basically stands for. So this is also something that the government of the day can look into to strengthen the constitutional body. And in fact, a lot of such inputs can further make the democratic system of India very robust and strong. So, in the backdrop of a lot of these issues and disputes that you probably would have been reading in the newspapers with regards to electoral symbols, I really hope this video has been helpful in giving you the answers that you had been looking for. If you have liked the video, then let us know by pressing the icon, and also share and subscribe with your friends. Thank you so much.